It's always a great pleasure to have guests coming back, especially when they've been on a journey themselves. And Lars, that's our guest today, wrote The Happiness Sweet Spot, and we did a talk about that. We actually did that in your cabin out in the rural Denmark is maybe too much said, but partly in rural Denmark. And we've been in touch since, and we're very shared believer about, it's very important that, we do things with purpose, compassion, and actually happiness, and how we actually build that into organization, because that's the real competitive advance. And then you went away and you wrote another book, Compassion in Action. And that has developed another little theme I started picking up on. You started talking about being a gentle giant. If you follow you on LinkedIn, there will be conversation, and we'll come back to what a gentle giant is. So welcome back, Lars. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Again, you're a great host.
Thank you. Yeah, you challenged me a bit before we went online. It's always good to be on a podcast if the host is good. So I'll do my best. I can't do nothing else. What made you go on the journey from organizational happiness to compassion in action? Because the first thing I thought when I heard about your project, but you have already covered compassion, haven't you? Yeah. But then you discovered something.
Yeah, that's
as you started talking about the book, implementing the book, I guess, as well in clients' work and so on.
Yeah, I think, I learned something, right? So the Organization Happiness book was very well received, right? It became number one in many geographies. And because there was it was more like a practical book with the happiness sweet spot. There were three areas, purpose, strengths-based leadership, and compassion.
Yeah.
And when we started working with organization with this tool, it's not a one-size-fits-all model. It's more like an enabling framework. We can talk more about that in relation to my new book here, Compassion in Action. But when we started working with organizations and leaders, they wanted to talk about compassion. Leaders wanted to talk about compassion.
So that was what they grabbed out of the book.
I think the purpose side, you get it, your strong why, maybe you have it, maybe you haven't, and then you need to work on it if you don't have it. Strengths-based leadership is also something you can relate to. Like what's your superpower? How do you put it into play for your purpose of your organization?
Yeah.
So on that execution, I think leaders gets it, and we facilitate that, right?
Yeah.
On compassion, it was like a Pandora's box opening. Also for me, I think I thought I nailed it in 40 pages, something like here's how to on compassion, right? Or compassionate leadership.
Yeah.
How do we cultivate a culture of compassion?
Yeah.
But those conversation was, I think, a lot deeper. And when I wanted to talk about compassion with leaders, how do we cultivate a culture of compassion in your organization? They wanted to talk about self-compassion. They want to talk about themselves, right? And of course, that's a big part of being both a consultant, advisor, a coach, or whatever you are in that field. It's also having those conversations. But it was like there was something I missed, and I started to unfold or unpack compassion more. Like, how can we actually have compassion in action? I mean, how can we implement it? What enabling tools do we have? How can we talk about it? How can we get from, it's like you mentioned, strong purpose, you said in the beginning here.
Yeah.
That's a big part of what we also can talk about here. But, if purpose is not executed, then it's just poetry, right? It's
it's not a statement on the wall.
Yeah. So it's more like, how do you get into what is it that you actually do, and how can you work with it as a leader? And I think we can talk about why is it important, right? Because this, I think, just to highlight that up front, I think the latest study I've seen, we spend like 90,000 hours at work, right?
There's a lot. I read that in your
in a lifetime, right? And I think as leaders, we have an obligation to create an environment where people, they thrive, or we focus on their well-being, right?
Yeah.
It's a big part of compassion. So it's an obligation, and it's also a huge opportunity to what I say is to care for the well-being of the people we lead and serve.
Yeah. And why now, you think? It may be an obvious question in the world we live in, where we are so divided in many areas, but we don't have to go into the deep philosophy of that. But why do you think compassion is relevant now?
Yeah. From my little world, and that of course I see, I travel a lot, and so I see leaders from many countries. And you can look at the world. You can even look at state leaders. And for me, when I published that book in March, it was for me it was that's a story in itself. It took me. I had everything. But it took me 28 days, right? I sat down and said, the world needs that book now.
Yeah, I can actually remember, I met Lars in January, and he said, I need to go and write this book before end of April. You said, well, I have the all, but I need to put it together, yeah?
Yeah.
And then you went and did it, yeah?
Yeah. And it's also always it's a brutal process, a vulnerable process of writing a book. And, it's not easy. But at that point in the world, and many leaders were trying to understand what is good leadership here, because we have so many different role models, right? And many of them are old, loud men. Yeah. And I think just to keep it to that, and I think we need to speak about leadership in a different way.
Yeah.
Because strong leaders are not loud. Just to put it briefly, or short.
And we'll come back to that in a second, but what is the real leadership challenges then in the world we live in? Because there's a lot of focus, right now on geopolitical issues or technology or, external factors. I often believe that's very much out of our control as leaders.
Yeah. So my focus is on organizations and leaders, right? And of course, that has a ripple effect. If we succeed in facilitating thriving organizations, of course there is a business case around that. But it also means that people that organization are supporting structure for society, right?
Yeah.
If we manage that, but why? Now, I think, and it could be 2 years ago or 3 years ago also, but there is the last 5 years, I think, if you look at, Gallup publish something sometimes, or every year they publish, what do they call the state of the global workforce?
Yeah,
right?
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. And you can get that report and print it and read it if you want, and or download it. But every year, employee engagement, burnout, mental health issues, things like that we know the words for that have been increasing.
Yeah.
Belonging in organization has been going. Maybe we can talk about belonging. Has been going down a lot, which essentially means that people are not feeling well at workplace, and that's a lot of. It's like 60. The recent one was like 76% said that they were not happy. Something like that in
by working in the organization.
I have to be careful with the Gallup figures. Read them yourself. They're very good at So I think the fix. We have a global workforce crisis. We have a mental health crisis in our society, right? I think we can agree on that.
Yeah,
and a lot of that has a link to what it is, how we spend our time in the workplace. And I think the fix is leadership. And that's compassion in action. I don't think you can have real leadership without compassion. And that's I think the entrance to this compassion in action.
Do you think sometimes, in leaders often, I talk about, they focus often on the execution of things. So they build systems and frameworks and so on, because when you start talking about compassion, I'm also starting to thinking about how do we actually define that? Is that definition of Brené Brown or the Atlas of Heart or whatever it's called, that book talks a lot about these emotions and so on, trying to break them down, what they really are, grief and so on. So how do I handle that, and how do I actually become good at that as a leader? Because I can build system and execute really well. I understand how to make a plan. Here's the goal. These are the steps we need to go through, and I can manage people's time to get to do that. When we get to this, which often are called the soft bit, yeah?
Yeah.
How do we become good at that? Because I believe it's incredibly hard to become good at that. And I think it's like a thing you're never gonna be done with. But
yeah, and it's not soft. We can I can make that argument later, but so let me start in another place that it's not soft. I think the most, and we know this from research, right? Yeah. The most effective leadership style that you can have is leading with compassion, projecting warmth, creating connection, building trust, right?
Yeah.
And that's sometimes it's counterintuitive for a lot of us that are brought up with you need to be strong, you need to give directions, and you need to project your credentials, your CV, the certificates, things like that. But it doesn't work in reality. If you start doing that as a new CEO or manager leader, it creates a disconnect immediately. So what you want is you want to build that connection. And let me just say it up front here, and we can get back to it if you want and if we have time. But, compassion builds trust. And I'll give you the definition of compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion is an interest in other people's difficulties and a burning desire to do something about it.
Yeah.
This is also the definition of leadership, I think.
Yeah.
And this is not just empathy. There's some, we talk too much about empathy, I think.
Yeah.
Empathy is more a passive thing.
Yeah.
If you dive into empathy, but compassion is an active thing.
Yeah.
So compassion builds trust. Trust is a building block for psychological safety, right?
Yeah.
And that's also a whole theme in itself. But psychological safety is the one most dominating factor for high performance in teams.
Yeah.
Google made the Aristoteles project where they researched that with the whole Google, and psychological safety was the single most dominating factor for high performance in teams. So there is if you follow that argument, there is a direct correlation from compassion, an interest in other people's difficulties and doing something about it, to trust, building trust. That is a building block for psychological safety. That is a building block for high performance in teams. So there you have it, because that's what you want, right?
Yeah, and it's quite funny. We started talking about, I had this model lying. People that can see the video can see this model. It's the V model by Drexler Sippet, it's called. And we used that in a leadership workshop the other day. And we talk a lot about how do we take employees from a day-to-day level, from feeling unsafe when you get to work or start a project or start a new role. You feel very unsafe, yeah? Your psychological safety is very, this stands in Danish, by the way, but we'll translate. Then your job as the leader is to get them to safety as quick as possible. But we often think it's about giving them direction, telling what the plan is, what they should do to be effective. But we forget all these questions of why are we actually doing this? Who is involved? What is their story? What journey had they been on before they got there? What is expected of them? What does success look like? What are the consequences if we do it well for them and the organization. And actually, how are we going to do that? And actually, not just the leader telling that, but also the people around the table all feeling safe on these areas. But if you're not safe on these areas and you start executing, you see poor execution or you see distrust start to happen.
Yeah.
Because I felt I was not really helped to be successful, or I'm left behind, or I haven't got the training, or whatever kind of way it comes out. Yeah. And then leaders becomes frustrated and said, but I have spent time. We have set the goals. But yeah, you didn't really spend time to 20%, they give 80%. You just jump straight away to execution. Yeah. And it feels hard because it's so counterintuitive, because we need to get stuff done and we need to action, especially in the world I come from. Hospitality, yeah, is a fast moving industry and margins are tight and we need to take action and customers are waiting and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think a couple of things on that. I think very interesting. I think I agree with you, and I'm not an expert in the hospitality industry. Yeah. And I have a few clients, but I'm not an expert. I'm an expert on leadership or organization development. But I think very often what I see is a hospitality industry is a good example of if you manage to create authentic customer care, if you manage to build that, then you're well off, right? That's what you want.
That's the competitive edge.
Yeah,
the rest can be done. Yeah, that's technical.
Yeah, and I think on a model like that, two things that comes to mind is because sometimes when we work with compassion in action, how do you actually do that? Right?
Yeah,
it's like that's a good example of something that fits well what I'm saying. It's like listening, and I think there you can, even if you want to be nerdy about it, or if you want to take a deep dive into listening, right? You can go to Otto Scharmer, people like that, and say, how do we listen as managers? Do we listen to understand? Probably that's a good start if you want to listen to understand, right?
Yeah.
But you can, even if you practice presence, you can even start listening, doing deep listening, as we call it, deep listening, where you're starting to see the potential in another human being. And that's a deeper level of listening. And if you're able to do that in a model like that, then when you go down that chain that's where you see, okay, maybe you as leader, maybe you see something that you didn't expect or you didn't know anything about, because you're not the cleverest one in the room, right?
You should hire the cleverest people. That's your job. It's super interesting because really, I was just reflecting myself. I find it hard not to jump into plan. It's easy to say this, because you have experience and you want the team to move fast and you want them to be successful. But you have to hold yourself back, even with your body language. Like somebody has said to me, like once, hold your hands under the table and like just look at them and listen, and don't be the first one to say anything. Even though if you think you have figured it out now, you've listened enough, you want to move on, you actually have to see if they figure it out between them, because that's the biggest accelerator. I'm not saying I'm doing it out every time, by the way. Probably people say out there, I don't, but it's really the toughest bit is to listen, because you have your own story and your own actions going on.
Yeah.
And you think that other people are the same place, but they're not.
No, never.
Never,
Never. And I think that, there are just thinking about that, some of the training we're doing, it doesn't take you a leadership course to learn this, right? Or figure it out, or it's more like, if you're introduced to the concept of, I think it's 4 level of listening.
Yeah.
And you practice level 4 listening, and you do that by taking a walk with someone you don't know that well, and maybe ask them, "What's your life story?" Or things like that.
Yeah.
And you practice level 4 listening.
Yeah.
Which means that you are fully present for that other human being.
Yeah.
It's a gift.
Yeah.
for both of you, for both of us.
Yeah.
Because we don't experience presence a lot these days. We have difficulties being present. And as a leader, we can talk more about this. And I didn't expect it to take this route, but as a leader, if you're able to be present for just 1 minute, 2 minutes, the other person will feel that. And they don't expect it very often. And if you're able to do that, you can move mountains, because it's like a gift. We have so many, I don't have my device here, but we have devices around, and it tells you, and even my ring tells me my pulse or we have so many devices, and maybe you don't see that something is buzzing but you feel it. And we lose the connection, and then I lose the opportunity for connection.
And it's super interesting because I was interviewed about doing the podcast. It's about a year ago. And it was like, Phil Street, he asked me 2 questions. He said, so what is the biggest thing you learned about doing the podcast? I said, well, that's like a general learning. It's like I said to you, I said that before, it's like my MBA I never took, but I'm meeting great people like you, Lars, or anyone, and I get new reflection of what I do myself. I'll see the world in a different light. That's one thing. That's normally what education does for you. And it's actually the ability to have those moments where you actually need to focus on thing and you need to prepare for it. If you want to have a good conversation, you want to learn something. So if you don't do the preparation, you will probably not learn anything, and the audience will also as well. So I hope that comes true. But also you practice listening, yeah? And you find out how rare it is that you're practicing your listening skills.
That's right.
Even with your family, probably all guilty because we already think we know them, and he or she is doing that again, or my son is saying that, now he's down that route. But it could be a totally different story, yeah?
That's right.
He's frustrated or she's frustrated about.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very complex and a difficult thing to learn, to listen. And what would be a great example of, becoming better at listening as a leader? What is that some example you've seen play out in teams or organization where you've seen leaders have moved from maybe being distracted, focusing on their plans and their action, but actually slowing down and listening?
Yeah, I think 2 examples is, one example is that you see that it works well, which is then it's a motivation for me as a leader. I see, okay, it works. Yeah. I want to do more, and I want to do more of that. And it's not difficult to understand, I think, the concepts of listening. It's more to, pay attention.
Yeah.
And know when you are in situations where you can give that other person a gift of your presence, right? Because some people never does it. I mean, some people, they always 2 or 3 places at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And we have that feeling, and that means an example is I had an organization where the culture is or was, and I think still there a little bit, but it's like if you and I having a conversation, and my phone rings, I pick it up.
So we have a meeting, and then
we're having a conversation about your personal development goal, something like that is personal to you or important for you as a person, and I'm allowed to have my computer in front of me, right? Those organizations are out there, and those kind of and it's not because leaders they want to be bad leaders, but it's a culture, right? Yeah. In that organization, and some of the people in that organizations, we started talking about this presence, having good meetings, maybe shorter meetings, fewer meetings, things like that. But where we built the connection, so we're able to build the trust, and we talked about that. But they said, okay, when I have a conversation with my manager, and the phone rings and he picks it up, what he really does is this.
I don't care. I don't
something
care.
Like that. I know it's probably not suitable, but it feels like, okay, he doesn't really care. Why should I care then? Yeah. And then engagement start to decline, and you're not really performing, and you don't really care, right?
And it's so interesting. I talked with somebody the other day, actually, how we still underplay how the relationship and the impact of the nearest leader is. And it actually sometimes is unconscious things that leader is aware of, like having the laptop. I think it's a really interesting thing. I was part of a meeting some time ago, and the CEO goes to the meeting and brings his laptop. What do you think happens? Everybody brings their laptop.
Of course.
Where's the focus in that meeting on all the other stuff that comes in, because the business doesn't stop, yeah? Emails and so on. And I understand there's some things you might need to show on a presentation or whatever, but everybody has their laptop in front of them, and you can just see nobody's really listening, and there's not built relationships in that meeting because we're just focusing on our own stuff going on. And then we might look like we're in the room, but it's funny how that, how an SEO really have to think about what they do. And I had another guy interviewed on a podcast. He talked about at some point he was always traveling around with a suitcase, which at that time there was not a laptop, always had the folder with all the papers in. And he said one day he found out he couldn't take his big doctor's suitcase with all the operational stuff in. He just had to leave it at home and come with nothing. That was the only way you could show 100% present and don't get extra jobs home, Because there was an overwhelm of tasks coming at him. At the same time, they didn't feel he was present. But he traveled around visiting them all the time, so he thought he was visible and present, but he was busy rolling out all his papers. And that's the same with the laptop, as you say. And I think it's so interesting how we forget that. The same if you go to a cafe, you don't start putting up your laptop and have a conversation with a friend. You sit there, and I'm very conscious trying to turn the phone around or put that away. Now the next hour I'm here.
Yeah, that's right. And you cannot be present for even half an hour or an hour, but you can be present for 2 minutes, which is a lot.
Yeah,
I think.
And it's quite tiring to be present for a long time.
Yeah. But it's also think about giving it as and giving it as a gift, almost like. But it's also very, very effective for your leadership, because this is where you build that connection, that trust, psychological safety. It's the beginning of that your employees giving you authority to lead, right? It's almost that. And one thing I thought about when we talked about listening is also the concept of, servant leadership.
Yeah.
Robert Greenleaf in 70, something like that. And I think it's a fascinating study and research, and I think it might be something that we should dive more into these days, and in relation also to compassion in action, but or compassionate leadership or cultivating compassion, because this is how can I, as a leader, serve you so you are successful in your job, right? Which requires listening skills, right? Which also requires caring. So listening, understanding, caring, which is one thing I think servant leadership is can be very strong if you do it right. And you have to define it, I think, in your organization. But also on a deeper level, stop me if I'm going too deep, but I'm always very interested in, from a society perspective, this means that you as a leader has to downplay your ego or get rid of your ego, right? Because you are in service of the future. Yeah. Which is very, very interesting, I think. If you as a leader can be in service of the future, not thinking about how do I look, how do I perform, what's my legacy, or whatever you think and how you want to step into the room. But if you could say, I want to be of service to you and to the future. It's like the metaphor here is we sometimes use, we plant trees under which the shades that we cannot sit under or something like in the future, something like that, right? So I think the servant leadership there, if you can kind of requires getting rid of your ego, right?
Yeah.
Which is not always easy, but I think it's a very powerful way of leading.
Yeah, and I think the way I was introduced to it, I can't remember exactly servant leadership. So somebody said to me, you're a farmer. You're not just there to harvest. It's actually the whole thing is about planting the seeds, and that's where the leadership job is. Yeah, so you have to cultivate the soil and make sure it's healthy before you put the seeds in, and then you have to have patience and wait and see that beautiful flower or beautiful field grow, and then you can harvest. But it's not up to you. You're not empowered. It's not about you. It's about all that work you do unseen. Yeah. And being not loud, yeah, as you started out. I think that leads very much to, because I really want to talk about, you have this idea that's called the gentle giant. And it was very interesting when I read about the gentle giant and followed you on LinkedIn and what you talk about. I often go back to Jim Collins' level 5 leadership. I don't know if you ever read about that, but there's some things about these leaders who ran these organizations that was consistently performing well over years. And the reason why they're performing well was because it was a compassion organization, because it has a healthy belonging in those organizations over time. And he tried to prove that with financial terms to get people to listen. Yeah. So he looked at the share price and how that was performing. Mm-hmm. But what is a gentle giant in your terms?
Yeah, in short, it's a term I came that it's a story, of course, a longer story, but it's a term I've been using for quite some years, and something that is, strong and gentle, right? At the same time, or giant and gentle, and that being able to be gentle, it reflects the leading with compassion in action, right? So I think it when I present it, very often it resonates.
Yeah.
Being a gentle giant means, being gentle, but still giant on the outcomes, right? It's like that. You can use many way of putting that, but that means letting go of your ego. The gentleness is not because it's soft or easy or not taking the hard conversations. It's more like it's clear, direct, and caring at the same time. So it's actually, you can care for the people that you serve and lead, right? That's what I sometimes say. But the caring part is, you can still be direct. Mm-hmm. And in your face, I don't want that. That's not a nice expression, but it's like, but if it comes from a place of caring or serving, you can do
helping,
that. Right? Helping, because I want you to
succeed.
I want you to be better at your job. I want you to feel better, wherever that comes from. That plays to the gentleness, and that's the compassion part in it, right? I care for you, and it's not about me.
Yeah,
it's. I might have authority from a legal perspective or from whatever structure in the organization or something. But what I do is I care for my organization. I care for the people I lead and serve.
Yeah.
So that's at the beginning of a definition for gentle giant. It's it's something. I have a gentle giant manifesto. I try to put it into 3 pages on what does it look like. But we have different role models, and I could think of some people I know that are gentle giants, and you just mentioned a couple there.
Who would be, in your view, like if you have to put somebody that is known in a way, a gentle giant? If you look at them, they could be here, but they could also have left Mother Earth, that has built, a movement, organization, or business where you say that was a gentle giant.
Yeah, I think Mandela would be one, right? Yeah. I think we talk about putting ego aside. And things like that. Of course, there's a longer story to Mandela, but that's probably a good example of. because you could also, if you dive too much into the compassion side or the gentleness, that's where you have to be careful, because when you are in an organization, a business, you're a leader. So you have a responsibility that you need to
deliver outcomes.
Deliver outcomes through people, of course, and compassion in action. And I think that's the action part. I think that's where leadership is.
Yeah.
I think on the compassion in action for leaders, I think if you look into how is it really done, if you're a gentle giant and want to lead with compassion in action, it's really about, we talked about listening, caring. I think that if you start there, listening for potential, actually, right? Listening for how can we do more here with what we have?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the question, I think, if you're listening for that. And then the caring, and then I think in your model also, how do you then give it to your organization? How do you encourage your organization? How do you give that responsibility to your team so they are able to perform well, right? And take that responsibility because you already listened, you cared about the difficulties, as I said, and with compassion, and then you are able to perform and give that responsibility on to people, right? I think the right word is empowerment in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite interesting what you said before, which I sometimes remember to say when you have like a one-to-one. I'm back having people I manage, which manage people. So it can be really impactful what you do. And I always try to say to myself, and I always try to say, you remember this conversation is, my job is here to get the best out of you, your potential. So you have the biggest impact in your job in a way, and thereby the organization will have a positive impact. And I try, and I'm not saying that because I want to sound like some kind of textbook, but that's really just reminding us why we're sitting here. It's not because I need to get something done so my KPI gets checked off. That'll be lovely, but I believe in the long run that will happen. But if I saw how I was a younger leader, I will probably go into that conversation thinking, I need to get something out of that person so I can deliver my KPIs. I also think you are on a consistent journey or continuous journey, that was probably the right word, as a leader, where you actually learn over time that when you try to take the shortcut, it's not going to work. That's definitely been, but also because I was in an organization that was much more KPI driven on the traditional model where profit first, and everything else after, So I think that as a leader, if you frame that every time you both make it quite normal for your people to talk about these things, the compassion, the emotion, the words that normally are not used in business and work, We don't talk about, do you feel lost? Do you feel that you need support? Are you angry? Are you sad? What is it? Because you know it sometimes. You can see, you can feel when people, you feel the energy. Something is not right. Something is not right either in our relationship or your relationship being in this organization. Yeah. And how do you unlock that so you can actually focusing on helping what's wrong? Because you hired them at some point because you believe they had the potential. But then when it starts going wrong, we often look at what's wrong with them, not
that's right.
How we have forgotten to unleash their potential. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I agree. Yeah.
You talk about as well in the book and in your work about, and it's one of my favorite things. I think you put it up a couple of times a year. Complexity is the enemy of execution. And I don't know, I'm not 100% where you got it from. I think you know where you got it from because also know we have a shared passion for Herb Keller, the former CEO of Southwest Airlines, which I've been lucky to fly with once. But you talk about often we overcomplicate things as a leader. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that and why complexity, it should be more simple with all the tools we have today to run a business, but it seems like it's becoming increasing complex.
Yeah, so a couple of things on that, and I think it's also a reminder to myself sometimes, right? It's like complexity is the enemy of execution. So we see if we're not aware, it will just be half a page in the annual report or something like that, right? The people part, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
So how do we actually get from strategy to action? And I think very often we overcomplicate. And I say we, I have 25 years in the HR industry and as a leader, and so I've been part of that journey too. Yeah. But I think good examples are yearly employee engagement surveys. It could be systems that you set up to manage people, resource management system. I think I think the hospitality industry also is. I mean, there are many good systems. I think technology is a driver in that. And I say, but it should be an and. And sometimes managers hide behind the systems, right?
Yeah.
Because we have the system, it's there. It could be whatever. It could be very often. It's it's your time management or it's your resource management system. Or there's so many systems connected there, and and that makes, if you're a manager in, let's take that as an example, somewhere in the hospitality industry, and you correct me if we can talk more about it. But it makes it easy to say, I fixed it, right? We have a system for it, but you forget to have the conversation where you listen. And this is where you get a little bit vulnerable as a leader, right? So it's uncomfortable to not hide behind the standard operating procedures, the technology, the whatever you have. But you need to stand in front of it and have these conversations. And we talked about listening and compassion, because this is where the magic is, right? This is where, if you do this right, you create belonging. And I think the hospitality industry is a very good example of, you're able to do that. You're able to create belonging or work on belonging. And the definition of belonging, I can throw that out here for the concept that I'm working on. It's about being seen, being able to contribute, and feeling proud. Those three, and that's a longer framework. But those three things, if you're able to create this is where retention or lower turnover lives, which is a big part. The churn part, the employee churn in that industry is always quite high. This is where that lives. High performance lives. And this is where I just mentioned it, but I like the word. I don't know if you use that word, but the authentic customer care, where customers feel that here's a person that are proud of being here, able to contribute, or being seen here. And I feel that as a customer, and that makes me satisfied customer or happy customer, whatever you want it to. So that correlation, stepping outside of the systems to create belonging, right? That maybe you can, to put it shortly, which is a little vulnerable because you don't know what's happening as a leader. But that's where you need to be. And this is where you need to park your ego, right? And say, I'm leader. I don't have all the questions. Maybe I don't have all the answers. So
but maybe also not all the questions, I think.
But maybe I have some questions, and maybe this is something I need to get used to, asking better questions and listening more, right?
And it's so interesting, because you need the systems, especially in hospitality, because you need to deliver standard consistency. Standards are very important, but also you need to be prepared to scrap them if they don't do well for your guest and people. And often, sometimes the standard either help the employee only or help the customer only, I've seen. So your job is like finding that sweet spot of where, there's some things we need to do. That's compliant, yeah? We need to wash our hands. We need to follow food safety and all that. That's all good. But at some point, we also need to have that room for maneuver so we can have authentic customer care. But it actually becomes from the quality, I believe, of the relationship that managers have. And often they're busy filling out checklists or doing something on their device instead of actually being out there with the employee, and they don't like, they're task focused. I think that's the best word. Okay. They're more task focused than they're focusing on the relationship. Yeah. Because that's easy. I can tick that off and then I feel like I've completed something. I've gone to action. Where the relationship is, you can see when they have these conversations, when it becomes a bit too close, they withdraw themselves because then I'm afraid that I give too much. And actually the way you get your people to talk about their life and all the things where you learn a lot of them is actually you give it some of it to yourself. So you have to put your life out on the table. And I think that's, you have to see that as a gift. Yeah. You're opening up for a different kind of relationship. One thing I was thinking about as we're preparing for this, Lars, there's so much, as you say, we could dive into, but we talked about compassion, as a matrix. Yeah. If you think about how do you actually get that on the KPI sheet, because we had a different conversation just before Christmas. We had lunch together and we were talking about profit is not the only KPI. So what are you actually measuring on, and is that impact on people you meet every day, and how do you actually make that really relevant in the world that's driven by profit? And and I think we had a little period in the pandemic where we all wanted to save communities and the world, and I think we still want to, but we are back at the old KPIs: profit, sales, retention, customer service satisfaction, all these, which is relevant things you need to look at. If you don't have profit, you can't serve the world. But what actually lead to the lead indicators are often something else. And you talk about compassion. How do you measure that in an organization? What would your advice be?
Yeah, I think it's many things. That's a very it's a big conversation, I think, that is happening now, right? For organizations and leaders, and a lot of the old upbringing that we have had in the corporate industry and things like that, it focused on profit and growth, basically, right? And I think there's a bigger conversation here about growth for what?
Yeah,
that's put it on a very high level. It's like we need to think about or talk about people and planet, right? It's like, or it could be the sustainability agenda, and I think and let's see when this is happening. I think it's happening in the small here, that, when you want to have investors and things like that, they look at a bigger balance sheet. Yeah. They look at people and planet. And I don't think we have time to go into a sustainability balance sheet here, right? So if you have growth, if you have profit, what is it? How are you actually using the resources in your production, right? Yeah. And how do you measure on compassion? I think you have to come from compassion and then going down to, for instance, belonging. You can measure on belonging, right? Yeah. If you go down on that level, do you feel seen? Mm-hmm. This is about, do you as an individual feel that you are seen as the whole individual you are? Yeah. the person that you are with all the flaws and whatever you bring into the world here. Do you feel seen? Mm-hmm. Do you feel that you can contribute? Do you feel that you're able to use your superpowers in your organization? Mm-hmm. And are you proud of being a part of that organization? These are things that we can measure on, and it links directly back to the compassion part, where it starts, because you're not able to create belonging without compassion. And then I said, how do you measure on? I just mentioned, yearly employee engagement surveys, which is a HR monster, I think.
Yeah. And there's lots of legacy, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that, I don't want to go into that, but I think there are other ways of measuring things than the yearly. I think, bi-weekly 2-question, 10-question thing of something you think is important. I think that's important input to you as a manager, because then you need, what are the important conversations I can have?
Yeah.
And you need that as a manager, right? It's or as a leader, it's an enabling framework like that. And there's a lot of pulse surveys that are more like, here are 2 questions, 1 question, 10 questions, but not too many, and very often, and something that is this is the simplicity of it. I think it's simple. Where you do it simply.
Yeah, and I guess also I had a boss once, and he was very good at, he was available in a way. He was often around, so he ran, I think it was 8 restaurants. So it was quite a responsibility on an area, a very big area of Jutland, which is part of Denmark, where he had to drive a lot. But he was very much an energy. So he felt there was an energy in a place. He would then go and pursue it and find out, why is that energy there? Because he was like, good or bad energy. That's where he started. Is there good, bad energy here? What is the issue? Is it an operational issue? Is it the people issue? Is it a system issue? And then he would go and find out, and actually not leave before he found out. And actually ask. You talked about questions before. I can remember him asking lots of questions all the time. Never answers, but lots of questions. So what do you think about that? What would you do about that? Why has that happened? All those kind of things. And that was the first, probably when you said that, it was the first time he didn't have a KPI. He couldn't measure it. We were back in the 90s. He didn't have the tools to measure. We have that today. But he could actually, that was for him, his, compass to that, okay, we need to go and investigate. We need to figure out what's going on here. The energy is bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a brilliant example of, in organizations, and it could be small or bigger, like you just explained, or global even, that you find role models and lighthouses that you feel are building the culture that you want, right? And I think that's a beautiful example of that.
What about, you talked about before, and maybe we can touch a bit about this now, I think, because it's really key, I think, as well. What is good questions to ask? You said that gentle giants ask better questions, yeah?
Yeah.
Instead of giving answers.
Yeah. The best question I know is, tell me more.
What happens then?
Yeah, if you are able to be present, which means that you're here with that other person and you're only here right now. And you ask that question, tell me more. Maybe you have asked about, doesn't really matter. But if you say, tell me more, please, then it kind of challenges you to tell me the same thing in a different way. And sometimes if you're able to, this is what good coaches does, right? They can do this. They are here now and asking that question. Sometimes you hear yourself saying things that you didn't even realize, right?
Yeah.
And if you're able to create that space, then you're well off both as a leader and a manager. But that's the best question I know. Tell me more.
Yeah.
And I tell you, it also it also works at home.
Yeah. I was almost thinking that was what I was about to say.
We do this sometimes, and so when my wife tells me about a problem or something in the sofa at home at the evening, or what, we come home and we exchange what happened. I have learned that very often I can jump into. I hear it, I fix it.
Yeah,
it's a masculine energy. I would say.
It's a masculine thing. Yeah,
it's a very masculine
protector.
Energy. I think, okay, I hear you. I fix it. You just need to do. But my wife is very clever and smarter than me, of course. So she says, "Don't fix me.
Yeah,
I just want you to listen."
Yeah.
And then the question is, of course, tell me more. I mean, and that creates which is important at home also, of course, but that's created a different kind of connection, right?
Yeah, and trust again.
And trust, and
all that. And I think it's no different at work, But right. We are actually very quick to jump as leaders. And I was just thinking myself as you were saying that, like, I was thinking about an example from this morning where we're hearing the same story for the fourth time, but I didn't ask, tell me more, because I thought it's just the same again. And then as I was traveling here, I thought, I actually don't think I connected the two dots, because there was somebody that said something yesterday. And now suddenly, you get away from it and think, so I have to go back to say, sorry, I actually cut you short, principle, because I had to be in another thing. So I'll just be like, I have understood what you said. This is how we need to solve it. Let's wait for tomorrow. But I'm sure this person runs around with this problem now. I would just say, make it physical. I run around with this problem, and Michael didn't really give me the time to listen. He didn't listen. That's maybe conscious or unconscious, that person would feel that. Yeah. Super interesting.
Good example, It's nice reflection.
We're running out of time, Lars. That's always how it is when we have great conversation. But what are you most excited about right now in your work?
Yeah, when we walk down here, it's something I'm excited about, or something a message that I'm excited about, that I think works well or is well received right now. It's. I think we have to realize that the next big revolution is not technology. It's more humanity and compassion in leadership.
Yeah.
I think and I feel that movement, And when you talk about being gentle and not loud, of course, that's a silent movement. But I feel that, the tribe or it resonates really well. And I think that doesn't mean that we talked a little bit about AI, and I don't think we should jump into that too much. But AI is there. We need to, and I'm excited about how you build organization and structure them, and organization design and everything. But that's like, it can be a competitive advantage for a little while. Yeah. It's a technology, and you can be better and faster and everything. But the real unique competitive advantage is how I think it's in your purpose and how you lead and manage your people, right?
Yeah.
Your culture.
Yeah.
And I feel that, that I'm excited about that, the gentleness, not being too loud, and still create a lot of followers. It feels like the message resonates.
Yeah.
And there is a ask for that, and a need. And when I work with organizations, it working like this, which is not a transformation. It's a building a culture, right? Cultivating a culture that take care of the people we serve and lead and deliver great results.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to see some of those results coming out now.
Why is it that we find we've known this for years? It's not like, from the 70s, you said, you mentioned there's probably books before that talks about, great leadership or more human leadership. Why is it that it's so hard for us to get it done, you think? Because lots of leaders talks about it. Yeah. You can go on conferences, you can have 9 speeches, all talk about great leadership or purpose, whatever it is. But like transforming it into day-to-day operation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think we need, sometimes I put on my suit and I step into the boardroom and I talk about the business case mostly, right?
Yeah.
It's like, but I still say for some organizations, it compassion, happiness. I talk about these things in connected with your business, right?
Yeah.
And for some organizations, it's an alien concept.
Yeah.
It's like I don't get it. Why should we? And for some of these industries are doing quite well, right?
Yeah.
And if you're doing well and you still have, a profit margin of 20 or something like that, why should I
change? Yeah.
So I think it's coming from, it was more difficult 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it's getting a lot easier and much more. And the many of us, including you and I and others, coming out with books and that are talking about this way of leading people. So we both. I think it comes from both a business angle. They say it's a really, really good business case. We know this.
Yeah.
But it also comes from a society, politicians' perspective. As
employees, demand.
We need to take care of our society and organizations, workplaces have a huge role in that, right?
Yeah. What is the one question you wished I've asked you, and what would the answer be?
Yeah, I thought about it as I thought, why did I write the book?
That's a good one. Yeah. Why did you write the book?
But I think we started off with that. But I think that the world needed that book or that message. I think you cannot have real leadership without compassion. It's and I think that's the short for it, and we need to know a little bit more about how to compassion in action, right?
Yeah.
Put that into action.
Where does people connect with you, Lars? And where do they get the book? If they want all the books, if they
LinkedIn is a good place to connect with me.
Yeah.
That's a lot going on in the conversation. I love to have those conversations and people chip in. And sometimes it works really well to have these conversations on that platform. That's the best for me. And both books are on Amazon and different geographies, so you can order them there, or both on print and Kindle.
Great. We'll put all that in the show notes.
Sure.
I send you power and energy and love for the journey ahead of keep on moving the movement on gentle giants. Thank you so much for coming back to the show and sending you all the good luck.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here. Good, very nice conversation. I mean, you're a good host. Time's running, right?
Time's running, yeah.
Thank you. Excellent.